Chief Justice John Roberts has real concerns about threats to judicial independence. That was the message he conveyed to a group of over 600 judges and lawyers in upstate New York this week in rare public comments that the New York Times reported. John Roberts, for the second time, publicly criticized the Trump administration and MAGA Republicans for, although not by name, of course, for leveling impeachment threats against lower court judges who had simply ruled against him, usually in a preliminary posture. He said, "Impeachment is not how you register disagreement with a decision." And then later in the remarks, he talked about judicial independence. He says it's central, saying that the job of the judiciary is obviously to decide cases, but in the course of that, to check the excesses of Congress or the executive. And that does require a degree of independence, and was met following those comments with applause from the gathered judges and lawyers who love hearing that kind of stuff out of their chief. But does John Roberts really care about what's going on? Does this really concern him so much? Here's a guy who literally laid the groundwork for the current state of autocracy that we are living in America, broadly unleashing money in politics through the Citizens United decision, greenlighting gerrymandering and voter suppression. And of course, last year in the Trump versus United States, announcing sweeping executive powers and immunities from prosecution that Trump has picked up and is using like a cudgel to destroy the basic framework of our country. And here we have the situation now. Roberts and the Trump administration seemingly at odds in so many of these cases, but under the surface, very much aligned in terms of the long-term direction they're trying to move the country. So much alignment between the funders and the operatives behind Trump's Project 2025 and the Roberts court capture scheme and the agenda they are driving. And to dig into this dynamic, I wanted to bring in Meagan Hatcher-Mays, Senior Advisor at United for Democracy, my friend, my partner in this work. Always great to have you with us, Meagan. You wrote this amazing piece on this saying John Roberts does not care about this at all. This is all spin. He's, in my estimation, probably the best political spin doctor and politician in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have some of those dynamics playing out. Tell us about your piece and sort of how you're seeing this situation as these big tensions come up to the court.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your question of does John Roberts care about this? Like, no, he definitely doesn't. I think what he cares about is the perception of not just the court, but of him personally. I don't think he wants to be perceived as somebody who's handing sort of political victories to Donald Trump or to Senate Republicans or House Republicans, even though that is in fact what he has been doing and would like to continue to do. He just doesn't want people to know that that's what he's doing. So I really get the sense from him that he is really not a fan of the means through which Donald Trump is trying to achieve his goals, but he's fine with the ends. He is totally fine with, I don't think he really cares about mass deportation. I don't think he really cares that much about Kilmar Abrego Garcia personally. I think he just feels like it's this illusion of impropriety that the Trump administration is through which the Trump administration is trying to achieve these goals. That bothers him because he doesn't want the court to be under a microscope, because he and the other MAGA justices on the court, that's what they got picked to do. They got picked by the Federalist Society types and the dark-moneyed right-wing judicial activists. The reason they got picked was to dismantle the federal government. So check. Gut the Voting Rights Act. Check. Overturn Roe v. Wade. Check. But he doesn't want people to think of the court as political, which is a very tricky dance that he is not doing a very good job of moving or navigating, I don't think, at this moment.
No.
So
the flagrant corruption of his colleagues that he helped.
Yes. It's hard to do the corruption dance when your colleagues are comically corrupt, taking these like ridiculous lavish vacations and stuff.
And sorry to interrupt again,
right-wing dime.
It also strikes me that like that project, that steady sort of legalistic advancement of the right-wing agenda, the policy agenda of the Republican Party, it was sort of easy enough to do under the cover of neutrality and law and doctrine for so long. But now they've done so much damage that to do
Yeah.
the next things, like it's almost like there's no way to do it without being like,
Right. Well, that's the thing is like they got too greedy, like the dwarves in Lord of the Rings, they dug too deep, and they uncovered this, like they woke up the American public. Everyone was just kind of like, sorry for the Lord of the Rings reference. But they everyone was like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. What is going on here? Because I think up to this point, up until like the last 5 years or so, they were kind of able to hide under or behind this shield of, well, it's not that we just go where the law tells us to go. We just are interpreting the law as it is written. We're just originalists. We can't help it. This is just the way that it is. But it's not that we have personal animus against the people who are being harmed by these rulings. It's just, our hands are tied. We're just calling balls and strikes.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
And he
and
wants,
somehow
and
they only call strikes when like women and minorities are involved. So
it seems like it's always a strike.
weird.
Um, and I think you're right, right? Like and there's a really important dynamic here whereby the ultra overreach of the Trump administration, it's just too much for
Yeah.
them to be able to sustain this agenda under the cover of legitimacy as a court. And so that feels like it's a big part of what Roberts is trying to say with like, guys,
Hmm.
chill out. We
Yeah.
kind of got you. We're going to be there for all this. You don't need to
Yes.
go so far over your skis for us all to get there without the
Yeah.
blowback that you're creating. It sort of reminds me of the dynamic with Dobbs and Roberts, who clearly wanted to just keep incrementally
Yes.
removing the abortion right. And he was like, Alito, once he had the votes, it wasn't going to happen.
It was never going to happen, but that's what he really wanted. And you do see some of that with Brett Kavanaugh too, maybe not so much, but John Roberts, if he can choose an unworkable compromise that continues to like destroy people's rights but helps him look better, that's what he wants to pick. I think Trump is making that really difficult for him and Trump's administration. I mean, just today, Thursday, Kristi Noem is telling the Senate Kilmar Abrego Garcia is never coming back to the United States, even though the Supreme Court did say in a 9-0 decision you need to facilitate his return. I think that Donald Trump and his administration are in defiance of that court order. I think that they are not in compliance with it. But I think if you were to ask John Roberts if Donald Trump is in compliance with that order, I think he would say yes, because he's too much of a coward to say no. I think something that's been coming up a lot, people ask me, it's like, well, okay, I think Donald Trump is in defiance of a court order. What does the Supreme Court do? That's such a good question. As far as I know, it's never come up. I don't think that the court has ever had to, I mean, maybe a little bit with Nixon, but the court has never had to make an attempt to rein in an executive that's this out of control. And then it's like, do we hold the president in contempt? John Roberts does not want to be the first chief justice in history to answer that question. So what he ends up doing is writing a pretty mealy-mouthed ruling in this Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, where that was the one where the Maryland resident who was here lawfully was abducted off the street and sent to El Salvador with basically no due process. Every court that has ruled in this has said, even the Department of Justice has said, we made a mistake. We should not have sent him. He should never have been removed. And the lower courts have said, you need to bring him back. The Supreme Court agreed. But John Roberts in this ruling is saying stuff like, the DOJ should do everything they can to tell the lower courts what they're going to do to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back. That leaves Donald Trump and DOJ and Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem a lot of leeway to be like, well, what can we do? And that's what they told the lower courts. There's nothing we can do. And they put an emphasis on the word can. So not to get too in the weeds on this, but it leaves Donald Trump and his cronies quite a bit of leeway to make the argument that they're still in compliance. They are doing what they can, which to them is nothing. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to bring this man back. And for John Roberts, it's kind of great, right? Because everybody says, well, it was a 9-0 decision saying you need to bring Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador. So he gets that win in the public's view, because very few people support this, what happened to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But he still wins in that he's given a great deal of latitude to the Trump administration to avoid having to actually comply. Now, again, I think that Donald Trump is not in compliance with a court order. But I'm not John Roberts. John Roberts does not want to have to say Donald Trump is in defiance of my ruling. And then what am I, John Roberts, going to do about this? He doesn't want to have to answer that question.
Yeah. And I thought your piece just broke this down so well. And dialing in, I really don't think it's getting into the weeds. It's really important, actually, to look at the way the Justice Department put that word can in quotes.
Yeah.
John Roberts' language, which gave them this huge out to come back and say, "Oh, we can't,"
Yeah.
and then they're like, "Oh, wow, like we're not stupid. Like we can,"
Right.
because they're not. These lawyers are really good lawyers. They know what they're doing. They know who their judges are, what their audience is, and they know that they can make this all work for themselves by walking this tightrope right along with John Roberts, who I think they quite clearly know does not want this conflict.
No,
Uh,
he doesn't. And then again, that's why you see him kind of go to these elite soirees to be like, don't worry, the judiciary's independent. We're good. It's central to our system of justice. But this court under John Roberts' purview has never been independent. This is all part of this kind of very big dark money scheme to capture the Supreme Court for wealthy conservative interests. Well, I shouldn't say conservative, but right-wing interests. That's why John Roberts and Alito and Thomas, that's why, and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they were all picked, and Gorsuch, I always forget him. They were all picked to be a part of this project. It was not to be independent. It was to hand power to the people who are already the most powerful people in our country. And we've seen it in all of their big ticket rulings, from labor to the environment to abortion to voting rights. Those cases never shake out. Excuse me. Those cases never shake out in the direction of the people who actually make up this country. They almost always help. I actually am not aware of a John Roberts opinion that has upheld any section of the Voting Rights Act. Maybe last year he's upheld whatever is left of Section 2, but he got rid of the rest of it. So it was just like a kind of a throwaway ruling.
Yeah, yeah, and Megan, I think it's so important to get down into these weeds because as I look around the ecosystem, right, we've got all this really important litigation trying to stop the damage that the Trump administration is leveling upon us. A lot of eggs in the basket of the court trying to do the right thing. And when we get these little teases like this 9-0 decision that seems to be adverse to the Trump administration's policy desires, we breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, well, at least the court is there. But if you start to look, it's really that they're working in tandem. They're working together to advance a common agenda and to do so with as little political blowback as possible. And it's why I think the lawyers actually kind of need to get out of the room in terms of setting the agenda politically, in terms of political strategy, and why organizations, coalitions like United for Democracy are so important, right? You've got legal groups in there, of course, but a broad-based coalition of more than now, I think 160 organizations representing diverse communities, all sorts of different issues, climate, gun safety, reproductive health care, the list goes on. And these are the communities that I think for too long, frankly, have been looking to the courts and saying, oh, well, hopefully we get the least bad outcome, or maybe we can make incremental gains. But these guys are not our friends. And so this needs to be a political organizing movement, right? So
Mhm.
and I think this is the moment for that as much as any that we've been through.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about this before. The we're in this situation where the court is behaving politically, and so like normal doing business normally, whether you're litigating or whether you're trying to pursue a policy in Congress, is not business as usual, is not really going to work, because we're in this, like, we're in a crisis. We're in this constitutional crisis. Like, you have the executive ignoring orders from the Supreme Court and almost bragging about how they're not, like, Christine Ohm today saying no chance Kilmar Abrego Garcia is ever coming back, just really bragging about how they're not planning on complying with court orders. So this is really a moment for us to think about what we want the judiciary to look like. And I want to acknowledge that this is a really hard topic to think about, because what we're talking about is both immediate and long term. Because right now we have an immediate problem with the Supreme Court, but going forward, we don't want to be back in this situation again. So you have to think about both short term, what can we do to fix the court, and long term, how do we prevent it from being recaptured by billionaires? And it's really, I think what is challenging is what I want to acknowledge is that we're in a situation right now under Trump 2.0 where everything is really hard and everything is bad. Everything feels very existential because everything is existential. And so it's difficult sometimes to think, it's like, well, I can't worry about the courts right now because they're polluting my town, or they're, the cost of eggs are too high, or whatever the case may be. But I think what's really critical in our work is to remember that every single thing, at whatever policy issue motivates you to be a part of a movement for change, is at risk or is already been gutted by the Supreme Court under John Roberts. So it's like the through line of everything that we care about. And so as we're thinking about, the next 2 to 4 years and who's going to make up Congress and who's going to be in the White House going forward, whoever those people are, has to be thinking about the courts. Because, like, let's say we get a trifecta of elected officials who all want to restore the Voting Rights Act and clean the air and restore labor rights that have been gutted by the Supreme Court. We could pass that legislation all day, but this court and the justices that are loyal to Trump and to MAGA interests or to the Federalist Society, never gonna allow progress to move forward. So what the court looks like has to be really essential to whatever policy discussion we're having about everything else.
Yeah, or how much power it wields. Because I think at the end of the
Correct.
day, you're right? Like, Roberts doesn't care. He's not concerned about escalating consolidated power in the executive, except that it infringes upon what he thinks of as his monarchical power to decide all the questions of our lives from his perch as the Chief Justice of the United States. Meagan Hatcher-Mays, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your amazing work at United for Democracy and for your podcast and your writing. Folks, make sure that you don't forget to like and subscribe to our work here at Court of Accountability and Legal AF. We are thrilled to be with you every week, talking through these issues with our best friends and partners in the work. Meagan, how can folks find out more about your work, your individual work, your work with UFD?
Yeah, so UFD, you can find us online, unitedfordemocracy.us, and you can go to our website and see, what we've been working on. We've launched what we're calling the SCOTUS Nerve Center, so you can get resources about kind of what's going on with the court, the cases that are pending, and how to fight back against these sort of corrupt justices and the rulings that are really very viscerally impacting all of our lives. So definitely check that out. As far as me, I have a newsletter. It's called swampperson.substack.com, where I mostly write about politics and the courts. And some weeks are more difficult than others, but feel free to subscribe. It's free. So if you liked what Alex and I just did here, you'll love my newsletter.
You'll love Meagan's newsletter. Okay, until next time, stay mad, stay motivated, stay mighty. Signing off.
I'm Michael Popak, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popak Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popak Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states. States and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.